We must stop the terror. I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Now watch this drive.
They call it grave to raise you from the sorrow. Always hurry doesn't change the fact the soul's had more.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Scorpion Movement podcast. We haven't made an episode in a while, and that is due to a lot of the absences in the co-host. But today, thankfully, I managed to get us on a very exciting guest. And Antonino Tati, if I believe that I'm saying the name correctly, is a communications graduate and a multimedia creator who works primarily in radio around Western Australia. He is a curator who runs the Cream Zine, as he calls it, and along with his work in alternative radio and other such subcultures, he is a self-described man of many hats who has recently completed work on several art projects that I believe that we'll talk to him about more thoroughly throughout this interview. And he also works with a number of organizations that support our Aboriginal Australians through other activism and such. So I believe through the actual discussions regarding all this artsy, craftsy, stuff that we so often talk about in the Scorpion Movement podcast, where we cover the intersection between what is nowadays controversial and, let's say, more political or philosophical, and that which is an expression of the human soul. Having a guest like Antonino is a really exciting opportunity for me professionally. So, Antonino, welcome to the show. It's been a long-awaited pleasure to have you on. I believe we've been planning this for several weeks, and I hope to get an opportunity today to pick your brain. So, if anything, please feel free to introduce yourself or tell me if I left something out of that initial introduction.
Jacob, good to meet you too, and finally put, I suppose, dialogue to the name.
Yep.
You pretty much covered it. I would say the magazine and pop journalist aspect of my life is a little higher than radio. I've sort of slowed down a little in the past few weeks on radio, mainly because I've been choosing to record my own stuff and make an album, but we can talk about that a little later if you like. Jack of all trades, man of many hats. I must say, I think people like your good self and myself, we sort of don't subscribe to that abhorrent word specialization. I think if you
Mhm.
lived your life doing something for 40, 50 years in a job or career, you're going to get really bored and you're not going to suck the marrow out of life and enjoy it as much as you should. And I think you should enjoy what you do for a living. And so, yes, I managed to balance a bit of music, pop culture, film, art, production, drag, music making, book writing, book designing. I'm now graphically designing notebooks inspired by the Beatles. So I'm always got to be creative and I've always got to be doing something. But if I was a stonemason or something like that, I think I'd get pretty bored working as hard as I do. Yeah.
Yeah. This is, of course, something that we were discussing just shortly before the show. And I actually found your analogy very intriguing, how working for 40 or 50 years in one discipline is not really enjoyable unless it's a discipline that you enjoy. Primarily because I think this correlates to how the world used to be, where you could actually, work in a certain discipline for, let's say, 40 to 50 years, and you wouldn't have the overbearing threat above you of suddenly being fired or laid off by your employer, of suddenly being kicked to the curb. But unfortunately, as we progress through this digital age, I think it's become clearly apparent to me and many other people all around the world that you can easily be discarded from any job these days. You can be discarded from any discipline. I think a lot of people have recently lost their jobs or their passions because of the development of artificial intelligence. And now we
Mm,
find out that a lot of artists are being replaced in these fields because there can just be a programmer who improves upon their work by mixing it all and mashing it all together, which enables people to substitute them in their own careers. So their work is literally being used to, get them out of their jobs, which is a
yes.
leverage that we can have predicted like 10 or even 15 years ago. So with this
Mm.
rapidly changing world, I think there's no longer something like a specialization because there are so many people all around the world who can specialize in many things, and those people often get an advantage. So I wonder what you
Mm.
think of that.
Well, when I was growing up in the late 70s, we society had this paranoia that robots are going to take our jobs, robots are going to take our jobs, and of course we imagined robotic people at desks, which may be in the near future, but they're at the desks and they're actually doing everything from making an ice cream to writing a book. So we didn't believe it. It sounded like hype to us because of the physical robotic factor. I just didn't envisage bots walking around and driving cars. But we fast forward 30 years, 30 to 40 years, my age is showing, and it's actually happening. And it's happening so fast that I think we as society are forced to get used to it. And it's a scary thing when you think about it, especially if you are an artist or creator, because you don't want to have resources that are recycled through a robot
Right.
and misunderstood by that robot, because to be quite frank, the resources were fucking um, subjective anyway. The truth wasn't really the truth per se, and now you've got a robot trying to dish the truth out, and it's all chopped up and mangled and doesn't make sense anyway. If that kind of makes sense to you,
It
so
does, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm sort of not scared of it, but worried for society at large, because all that can come from it to control it or to clean it up is some sort of totalitarian sort of execution, I think. But as an artist, I'm just going to enjoy the gray area and the absolute mess the world is in right now and
Yeah.
just have fun with it. I'm just going to have fun with it.
Yeah. I wanted to quickly comment on the fact that now with like artificial intelligence and whatnot, it seems like robots are starting to think like humans, which by relativity actually makes them, think very stupidly. The more that it tries to emulate humanity, the more that it makes errors and it makes mistakes and it forms opinions and it comes at different things from different angles. And as far as like, robotic intelligence goes, where it's so quick at doing math, it doesn't really help when it can formulate opinions and take like different perspectives and then take a data set and then make quick conclusions on that data set and then make the decisions based off it. It just leads to a whole mess, and I believe that we're in a slow problem of that, and a lot of artists are rightfully worried. But coming into like the actual discussion of the podcast, actually want to relate this because you mentioned that you want to have a lot of fun with it when certain things like this are going on, and I believe your like pursuit of moderating the Cream magazine, which you've been running for a long, long time, has been largely around taking all of this stuff that's happening all around us that more traditional news media takes very seriously and just having like a little fun poked at it, having like a dialogue around it that's not necessarily very professional and suited and all of that. You can just sort of acknowledge the world for what it is and make a few jokes and move on. And I believe
Yeah.
as a society, we tend to do the same thing, but it takes us a while. And you can see this with like a lot of different tragedies. You can see this with a lot of different political situations. Like it's very serious at the time, but then
Hmm.
over like the decades, comedians start writing jokes about it, and eventually it like loses its charm. So I think like two immediate situations that I can think of is the Bill Clinton Monica Lewinsky scandal. As a person my age, I literally can't imagine that as anything but like a huge joke. Like I just think about it like, oh, this is so funny. But I'm sure to
Yeah.
someone living for that period, like the staffers in Washington were like sweating. They were like audibly like worried that they were gonna like lose their jobs. The political
Mm.
state of the U.S. was totally different. But I can't even imagine it. And then the
And
second
I
one,
think quite a few employers and big bosses were sweating too, because they thought if the president can go down for, whacking a secretary on the ass, I'm going down next because I've done worse. So I think a lot of people were sweating, but making fun of it later. It's funny you bring up that example because
yeah,
I was in the midst of finishing this record I mentioned just earlier,
yeah.
and one of the songs is it uses Depeche Mode's Policy of Truth, a very good remix of
Oh
it.
yes, yeah,
Great
yeah,
song, right? Great
yeah.
song. But I thought, what am I going to do? I love taking news pieces and interviews and found audio and recycling it. So I grabbed a Barbara Walters interview with Monica Lewinsky, and this was done a couple of years ago. Yeah, and she's going on and on about this and that. And the fact is that it's all crap that came out of her mouth, Paula's mouth, Barbara's mouth, Bill's mouth. So the policy of truth sounded like the perfect audio backdrop. And you've just got her subliminally weaving in and out about, him and what she does like or doesn't like. And then she just starts randomly bringing up soldiers in Bosnia to try and sound political. And the whole thing's a farce. So you're quite right. A couple of decades down the line, you can make light of such political situations. And I love to do that, as I
That's
say.
wild.
You do,
Yeah,
yeah.
the second example that I was thinking of was like I'm not sure if you're familiar, the whole Guy Fawkes situation, literal centuries ago in England, where like pretty much what you would describe as a terrorist attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. And at the time, for like the next 100 years, it was like a crime to even speak about it in the Kingdom of England. And now, in every single year in the UK, they celebrate a holiday where they wear Guy Fawkes masks. So
Yeah.
the peril of like the time and it coming into the modern day, even I'm afraid I missed out on two of other notable comparisons, which is like Napoleon and JFK. Napoleon was seemed somewhat of like an evil conqueror dictator at his time, and now we don't see him as that. We just see him as like a plain historical figure, the same way that George Washington was. And then with the JFK assassination, that for many years was a very controversial subject in everyday American politics. But now, because there's been a whole generation of children that were raised reading about it in the United States, it's just something that we never took very seriously.
Do you think though that these things, I'm turning the interview around now, aren't I? But discussion as it is.
No, of
Do
course,
you think that,
discussion.
yeah, do you think that us as humans becoming desensitized by these major dramatic moments, is that a good or a bad thing? Because if we get too desensitized by it, then it sort of gives carte blanche to politicians to organize assassinations or keep them up. If it becomes too much, or if we get too used to it, I think the serious aspect of avoidance of
Right.
of these events. We don't want it to become commonplace, but I suppose laughing at it just helps us as a people, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To make it
No,
that
I
light.
believe that's an extremely good question and one that would have to be considered by people far smarter than I am. But looking at it through that lens, I believe there is an aspect to it where you're absolutely right, where the public gets as a large desensitized to stuff like violence and war on television because we see it so much now, especially, with how quickly information spreads now. But I do believe there is also an aspect to it, whereas if people take the information that is coming in from around the world too seriously, also end up in a bad place. And I sincerely have a distaste for whenever people around me see the news on television and they themselves get extremely aggravated by it, or they begin lashing out at others, or they begin talking about it and thinking about it all day. And I believe I've reached a point of my life where every single time I hear about a bad event or something that happens, my first thought actually is just like, how does this affect me personally? And in
Mm.
99% of situations, the news that people do get upset about doesn't affect me personally. There's, of course, that
Yeah.
1% where it does, or it will further later down the line, but that's as a result of the event spiraling and going on and on and on. But the vast majority of stuff that just gets covered on the mainstream media is meant to rile people up to then sell advertisements. And now, as we move into this digital age, obviously, like people rile each other up, and that's not good either. So I would
Mm.
say it's safer to verge on the side of doing what Cream Magazine supposedly does per its description, and what I also believe that it does from checking out the website for the past few days, where it tries to poke a little fun at events that may otherwise people may look at them through like all these lenses of trying to be analytical and whatnot, not necessarily like being serious. We're not talking about like very serious topics here, but we're talking
Mm.
about the topics where people may like be like, oh, from the perspective of Harvard scientist so and so. And the vast
Yes.
majority of people aren't going to be
Yes.
looking at it through that way. They aren't going to be thinking about like the political implications of the imports of sour cream, whatever. People are
Yeah,
just going to
I
look at
mean,
it like, how does this affect me? And I believe that's what
yeah.
the magazine does, and I like that.
Absolutely. I wouldn't write an article about the tragedy of, say, the Kirk assassination that
Yeah,
happened recently. I would, we're in, if you're watching this years down the line, 2025, right?
yeah,
So, yeah, that happened. And that was not only tragic, it brought up conspiracy theory. It brought up deja vu about what supposedly happened to Trump, but God knows that could have been set up too when he was supposedly assassinated, attemptedly assassinated. It brings up a lot of things, and so all Cream magazine can do is almost satirize it. But I would never touch something like the Kirk situation because that's horrible violence.
hmm
And there's also a death involved and a soul gone. So a family to consider, his life to consider, politics to consider, etc. I wouldn't go there. If it doesn't have death or violence involved, then yes, I'm all for the satire. And I
yeah,
like to think of Cream Magazine online as a kind of modern or postmodern Mad magazine in a way. We've even got comic strips now introduced where we take the piss out of just the individual that has to deal with everything we're talking about here. You know,
yeah,
Monica who's getting angry at Siri or Alexa because they've given her wrong directions. You're talking to a machine, if that, you
yeah.
know what I mean? But they've humanized the metrics so much that us humans have become so stupid that we're now talking to the screaming at the phones, etc. So you've got to satirize that, and I've been doing a lot lately with comics in the magazine, and it reminded me of, oh wow, this is kind of Mad magazine, but probably less picking on the
Yeah,
politics,
yeah, yeah. I
more
would say
picking on the pop culture. Yeah.
definitely. I would say it's more of a postmodern label because we think of like modern, I tend to think things of like Vogue and the Cosmopolitan stuff like that.
Mhm.
Stuff that's more in the mainstream media circle. But when I think of Mad Magazine, I tend to think of like very early like postmodern works where we're just taking the piss out of the modern stuff. And I
Yeah.
believe you described that quite well. But with the woman screaming at the phone. Uh, there's a lot of cases like that, and recently I remember reading quite thoroughly. It was on another website, unfortunately, not your magazine, but about how Amazon is like changing the delivery robots that they're testing, so now they have like little faces on them, and they give them names because the research that they did found out that the more that you humanize something, the less people are likely to kick it in the face and stop it from working, which was their biggest hiccup in the development of these like little
Are they
faces.
going to give it cigarette breaks as well? That's what I
Yeah,
want to
and they're
want to
gonna like
smoke
make it
those.
like make small talk with passersby, of course. You need all that.
And one of them will bring donuts in on a Wednesday and all of that crap, right? They've
Yeah,
got
and
to
they're gonna
do it to
chat to
keep up
each
the good
other. I
work.
wonder how far this stuff can go. It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm not going to bag Amazon as greedy as its
Well,
owner
they sell my
can
books.
get.
I can't do it, but
That's
it's a similar.
exactly
I
what I
believe
was
a
going to
similar
say,
approach.
right? We can't bite the hand that feeds,
Yeah, of
even if it's, as
course.
big and monstrous as we think it is. I'm sure Amazon and the big telcos and the big, data owners, I'm sure they're going to get more consciousness as the years go by, if not from demand of the people and the public, at least for their own sake and for their grandchildren's sake who inherit the earth. Because if not, the world can only become a more horrible place. Global warming is only going to get hotter and colder in some places. Overpopulation is only going to continue. Landfill is only going to get more filled. So we've got to hope that your Bezoses, your Zuckerbergs, and then all the corporate sponsors of them. You've got to hope that the big wigs do become enlightened to sort of help slow down the pace of the mess and the madness. Yeah, yeah, I think
Absolutely.
it. Mm.
No, I would agree with you there thoroughly. I think we've seen like an increase of just people like that more running the show recently, and it's sort of like cast into doubt whether ordinary people have much of a voice anymore.
Well, here's the thing: they are supposedly with forums online, but
Mhm.
I think people forget that. these bots and the big algorithm and Big Brother per se, it knows exactly what it's doing. And the 1% or the capitalist way or boss versus proletarian, bourgeois versus this, it's been repeated through history all constantly.
Hmm.
And the reason it repeats is because the people in power have so much resources and so much intel and ultimately, are at the top and will find ways and means and hire people to help them stay there. This
Yeah.
That 1% is never going to go.
Yeah.
Royalty, aristocracy, it's never going to go. Why
Hmm.
would you want it to go if you were a king or a queen, particularly a greedy king or a queen, right?
Hmm.
Um, us commoners per se, we're happy with our lot. You go to Indonesia, and those people are one of the happiest populations on earth because they didn't have all the crap that we grew up with and the material clinging. So they don't miss it. But when you've accumulated material and accumulated wealth and accumulated ego and power and family and heirloom, you get so used to that no powerful soul can cut through that. And this happens through history constantly. And you have a radical phase, usually at the end of each decade, by the way.
Yeah.
If you look at it in a pop cultural sense, every decade over the last century has had this revolutionary part happen just about in about 8, 7, 8, 9, just before the
Hmm.
zero kicks in, right?
Yeah, of course.
In the 90s, you saw it throughout most of the decade, this whole milieu and postmodern potpourri of everything mixing and all of us appreciating trip hop and grunge and femme pop and everything, 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 everything. And part of Cream's job at the time was to add to the mix. It was
Hmm.
bored of traditionalism, bored of your so-called truth with a capital T, bored of bullshit religion, over fucking politics. Let's shake shit up. And so we were one of the few magazines in Australia. There were only 3 or 4 of us compared to your Vogues and Marie Claire's and Elle's, and which weren't even Australian owned. So we were independent Australian publishers that shook shit up. And we did it in a sense for post-feminism. We did it for queer culture. We did it for the environment. And we just said, we're shaking this tree. We're going to shake, shake, shake until, there's enough out there to stop people believing one diatribe,
Yes.
right? Monologue. And so done that work. I've grown up, and funnily enough, you grow up and you become more traditionalist. If you'll notice in 20 years, and
Yeah.
I've become more traditionalist in the sense that I sort of look at a lot of the issues of say trans people, and I am one of the biggest gender deconstructionists you could meet. The whole idea of Cream was, to allow women to get on top and allow gays not to be afraid of letting it loose after the AIDS epidemic. So there's subliminal connotations to the word cream, and plus the blending
Yeah.
cream, the blending of all those cultures and aesthetics. And I just kind of think that looking back, you go, uh-oh, what have we as a 90s Generation X messer upper or a postmodernist, what have we done? Have we confused people too much? Where now people don't even know the difference between sex and gender. Gender's the construct, sex is what you're born with. Some people are
Yes.
intersex, etc. But you've
The
got to know the
overwhelming majority of
scientific
people,
difference.
the
Yeah,
overwhelming
sorry?
majority of people, I just want to interrupt, that I've talked to don't know the difference at all. They think that
No.
the two terms are synonymous, which doesn't make any
Mm.
sense because there are no two words in the English language that mean exactly the same thing.
Exactly, exactly. And I think when you realize that sex is okay, keep it scientific, and there could be different degrees of intersexuality as
Yes.
well. I'm not sure, I'm not a scientist. But when it comes to gender, if you just remember, gender is a construct. No one, a female doesn't have to behave a certain way, and a male doesn't have to behave. The only thing might be occasional hormones that influence a man to be a little more passionate and angry, or a woman to be a little softer and caring because she gave birth. But other than that, wear
Mhm.
what you want, say what you want, do what you want, as long as you're not hurting someone. And when we realize that, I think we'll think less about the length of our hair, the identity we need to place on ourselves. You don't need to identify as a fox just because you like doing 1,000 different things.
That's
Foxes
true.
don't do thousands. They probably do a million different things, but they don't sit there analyzing and labeling it. They just get the fucking job done. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
the way I always have thought about it when it comes to these discussions is that someone's how they call it biological sex, but really the term itself is just, sex. It just has that nasty connotation where we need to put something before it, I guess.
Mm,
But sex was always the term that was used to describe, more of someone's like organs and whatnot, whereas gender was always used to describe, in my mind, the masculine, the feminine, how someone acts, how someone,
yes.
acts within the culture, their place in it, how they dress. I mean, when you think of alternative media, something like Rocky Horror Picture Show, right? You think of all these things which are naturally leaning outside of the boundaries of the contemporary like definition of like masculine or feminine. You look at stuff like drag, which you've mentioned beforehand, and there we also see something coming out of the masculine or the feminine. There's a lot of culture in of itself that doesn't appropriate any either masculine or feminine values.
Mm,
I believe there was like a study done that was like 70 to 80% of songs that are like popular get on the Billboard 100 are based around love or themes like that. But then there are a lot of alternative artists, particularly there were in the 70s or 80s, who don't identify with like either crowd. They don't make songs about love or whatnot, or like these very human experiences. They make songs that are more philosophical in depth. I went to a lot of shows back when I used to be in the UK with a
mm.
lot of like these experimental artists, and there are some that simply like read poems and whatnot, and they come on with these shaved heads and earrings, and you can't really tell the gender of the person, and that's because they're meant to represent something that is uniquely human and not
Mm,
only partial to the man or the woman. And anybody
mm.
with like a sense of nuance who is more on the artsy side can understand that. But when it comes to the average person, of course, they're not going to be interested in it. So it's far easier to group in sex with gender.
Mm,
But I also have noticed that in a lot of situations when we think of these musical artists that are impartial, and it's partially because I want to delve into music now,
mhm.
but possibly quite the most hated name in British musical history, Morrissey has also
Ah,
played with like the whole like gender and sexual identity thing for numerous
mm.
years, and there's also that discussion of what is it being used for, like are people misappropriating this, all of the kind of the stuff, but it really just comes down to like they're two separate concepts, and whatever side of the discussion that you're on, I think that still applies.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Morrissey because he is a classic case. He was quite fey and quite comfortable with liking things that were traditionally in England liked by women, like
Yeah.
poetry. Oscar Wilde, he's a reference of his regularly. A lot of queer icons are actually a reference. When Morrissey put a boxer on the cover of a Smiths record, he sexualized it. He turned it into this homoerotic thing. He almost made boxing a gay thing. So he
Mm.
had a very good knack of taking the aesthetics of traditionalist sex and gender, or sex and gender. Yeah, not sexuality. That's not what we're talking about here. Just sex and gender, and sort of bringing it to the fore for discussion and for different discussion, diverse discussion. It's funny now because he number one, has admitted to becoming more conservative
Hmm.
in his political thinking. And like I said earlier, I think that kind of happens as an adult. You don't
Yeah.
fully go right. You don't fully um, uh, flip your politics or beliefs on their
But you
heads.
begin to assimilate more traditional opinions.
You do, or you at least expand to both sides of the aisle, and you go, hang on, I've lived a little now, and I've seen this and lived that, in my case, I don't have children, but you may have bought children and want a better world for them. So you do become less of a punk per se, and
Yes.
become a little more of an adult with the punk still in him or her or they. So in Morrissey's case, he kind of admitted to going a little bit more right wing and conservative, and he at the same time just recently sold these biblical recordings of his. I mean, you talk about the Smiths, and you're thinking of a band that's almost like religious like when it comes to their songwriting, their championing of common people, their antagonism towards aristocracy, all of that. You think of the Smiths, and suddenly he was so precious about his song lyrics, but now he's, I think, desperate for money, so he's gone and sold it all to the record company, and of course, you know what that's going to mean. That'll You'll
Yes.
hear the music on Mercedes-Benz advertisements. So everyone's a bit of a sellout when we have to be, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a single field within artistic works or whatnot that you can't find what you would term sellouts. I think it is sort of necessary in the process to understand that your work is going to be used in some sort of way to promote which comes on top of you with the big corporations that control a lot of the streaming platforms, a lot of the television channels. I mean, ultimately, they're going to get one a piece of what you're creating so that they can then use it for their own purposes. And
Mm.
I believe as an artist, you also get paid for that. So it's also quite nice. You know, you buying food is
Oh,
cool.
yeah, on that note, Jacob, because you brought up the corporation aspect, they are taking, so you remember I said about the 1% will find the intel and make
Yes.
it to their advantage. They
Hmm.
can't help it. All it does, it makes the artists, the poets, the deconstructionists, the freedom fighters have
Yeah.
to subscribe to and give up and hold a flag up and say, we'll take it all and do what you will with it. And so it's defied everything that was so hard and worked on. But do you see what I mean, like that, about that an artist's job is to critique society and hope to change it for the better. And yet ultimately 10, 20, 30 years down the line, that art is bought by
Yeah,
the
I
very
see it.
establishment. Yeah, yeah. You see
Yeah.
where it's
Yes,
going?
yes, I see it.
And that's where I think the cycle comes into it and why it repeats through history, because our software
hmm
gets purchased. And by software, I don't just mean our
The
stories
actual,
on
yeah.
a Word document. I mean, what's going on in here is taken and then, dismantled if they need to dismantle it, or at least locked up in a vault. Sometimes it's literally locked up in a vault. A record company may not want to hear any more of what Morrissey had to say, or the
Yes.
corporations may not want, or the Queen or King might not want, and so it could get locked up in a vault, or it could get sold to Mercedes, BMW for an advert. But it's certainly not the artists anymore. It's not the people's either, because by the time the corporations are finished with it, the people hear that song completely differently.
Yeah, no, I see it. I sense a little bit of an analogy in my own mind, not necessarily in your statements. What's being said is very familiar to a certain book I read, which is Capitalism Realism by Mark Fisher. That
Uh-huh.
came out in like 2017. Mark Fisher has unfortunately passed away, but it was just a general tale on how everything, as anti-capitalist as it may be, as artsy and anti-consumerist and detached from the mainstream as something can be, ultimately, when it reaches the point where it becomes interesting to people, it will be sold and then reabsorbed into the system that then absorbs other things. So, in the same way that we see artificial intelligence booming now, this book primarily claimed that it's easier to imagine the end of the world and the end of capitalism, as Zizek, I believe, said, because we see all of these different things that are just being incorporated into like the narrative. I think of certain movies and TV shows that are championed on streaming platforms, and they're all very, very like anti-system. Like we're all, it's a group of people fighting the bad guy. And it's almost every single movie or TV show that you see nowadays, the explosion of like the dystopian horror genre.
Mm,
And you see it, and there's like this obvious thirst that's in people for seeing like a change and people rising up against the system. So that the
mm,
second that they get that impulse, it's super convenient that you can turn on your TV and you can see other people do it for you in a fictional
Yes.
narrative, so that way you don't actually do it on the street.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
brilliant if you
that's
think about it.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. But then does society get influenced by the media, or is the media influencing
No
society?
clue. They're doing it both ways, I guess.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's an interesting question. I think that dark period of television kind of started towards the end of the 90s. How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
21.
21?
Yeah.
Jesus, you sound like a man twice your years.
Yeah,
You're
maybe
so
it's the
intelligent.
mustache and the beard. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's got a very political connotation in the start. No, seriously
I'll
speaking,
have
you're
to shave
very,
it
very,
off now. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But here's a tip for you. If you've got that set of thinking, you should, still use the means we have today, like YouTube, to get it out there. And I think make the most of it now before it is
Absolutely.
surveyed
That's what we're here
and
doing.
targeted. Yeah, yeah. Let's scream and shout until they put that clipper chip in and stop everyone from watching it. But what were you saying anyway? We'll have to change tangent or
Oh
besides your.
no, we were just going on of how dystopian fiction and whatnot, and we paralleled from there onto what you were saying.
That's right. Around about 1990, it was quite funny.
Yes.
Remember, so towards the end of each decade, there's this revolutionary period. In the 70s, it was punk, or
Yeah.
60s, it was free love. 70s, it was punk. 80s, it became rap, hip hop, deconstructing music and getting the street message out there. And then towards the end of the 90s, there was something there, just totally mixing things up
Yeah.
and the internet age. Now, I think our society's become a little more docile because of the internet. Everyone's been dumbed down by the same sounding music and all of that. But we can turn to channels like Netflix and streaming channels where you can see this alternative world, which is either extreme and Stranger Things and Dexter and over the top in its commentary on the dark side, or it's actually just real, like old school Weeds or The Big C or Breaking Bad, of things that do happen to the everyday American and everyday
Yes.
person of the world. So it's good to see that that darkness is expressed on television, particularly the streaming side of TV, because it's a lot better and a lot more real than growing up watching the Brady Bunch, because
Yes.
the life was never the Brady Bunch, and little and behind the scenes what was happening on that show. Uh, the world at large was never like that. A family always has problems around the dinner table. They're not all happy, happy. So better to show this real darkness than or exaggerated darkness rather than everyone's happy and walking into the
The
sunset.
false positivity of the older generations that's now channeled into for like 50, 60-year-old women walking up to the cashiers at like breakfast restaurants demanding, "Why is there a fly in my food? You must throw it all away and refund it all." To like a
Yeah,
minimum wage worker that's probably making just enough to like buy half a Burger King Whopper and
yeah. But
like
tell me,
rent a mattress to sleep in.
but you've been a Karen. We've all been a Karen once in our lives, at least, haven't we?
At different levels. It's at different levels.
Yeah,
I believe the levels are different for everyone, though. Like for some people, that sense of injustice, rightful injustice, is sparked when they're ripped off for, let's say, $1 or 2. We would say.
yeah,
You would say also we have the same currency, just different valuations.
yeah.
But say same name. But for some, it happens when you get ripped off for $1 or 2, and some, have some greater conspiracy against them in their life, or their job, where boss is like planning on firing them, and stuff is going badly, and they're getting divorced, and then they snap. It's varies by person to person. But I found out that a lot of people in my generation are on extreme ends of that. They're either very, very angry over very small things, unnecessarily
Mm,
so, or they don't get angry at all. I know many people
mm,
who work very like manual labor jobs, and on inconveniences that we would all think is somewhat large, they just kind of shrug. I remember this one friend of mine, and he literally like burned his hand on both sides, and he just spoke about it as if it was nothing. And so
Mm,
in Gen Z, you see this huge
yeah.
disparity between those two sides. Whereas I think as we talked about, as the older the people get, the more traditional they tend to get.
Mm,
I also believe that the more mellowed out they tend to get, because we also see this in politics. Like people who are very young are likely to fall into the extreme ends of the spectrum, whereas where you get older, you sort of become mellowed out.
mm.
I think the UK Prime Minister is a good example of that, because Keir Starmer was this very like communist, like Marxist-Leninist socialist back in his university days, where he would go to these rallies and protest, and now he's like the most milquetoast, semi-conservative liberal that there is, like on the entire UK
Yeah.
political scene. And you see this repeat a lot, but the claim that I wanted to make, in addition to what you wanted to say, is that these like extremes also mellowed out with time. It's as you were saying, whereas you don't necessarily slide to the right, but you began seeing both sides of the spectrum. I think people are discouraged from being towards the extremes the more information that they see that's pointing towards against them, and they just slowly slide to like sort of a logical counterpoint, but by that time they already got health issues and it's a bit too late.
Health issues. How's that connected, would you say?
Oh no, I would say that for a lot of the claim that I was trying to make was that by the time they're like 70 or 80 or 90 years old, where a lot of people are just
Right.
like literally lying in their hospital bed, that's about the time that they will come to
Yeah.
authentic, logical, what you could
Mm.
say is semi-objective views about life. And it's only
Absolutely,
by
and
that point.
either worried or complaining if they're not senile that I wish I took a stand more often, or the opposite. I wish I wasn't so angry and upset all the time and
Absolutely.
just
It can be either of the two.
appreciated the miracle of life. You know what I mean? They do that. They do that. I'm going to say on the deathbed because I wholeheartedly don't intend to. I think
Yes.
we should live our life. Thoughtfully and
Yeah.
consciously for ourselves and for others, and but not waste it on being angry all the time or being aloof all the time. I think there does have to be a median in our thinking because it wasn't that shopkeeper's fault that the Karens are getting angry at.
Yes, of
Obviously, the
course.
one on that, and may not even have been the boss's fault for the directive of how to act or not act. It's just the way that it is, and systems change, society change, and we're going through a massive period at the moment where the owners of the money and the power and the
Hmm.
intel are actually getting the people to work more and more and more for nothing. I don't know if it's so much in the States as it is in Australia, but we now have to pack our own groceries at the checkout at a
Absolutely. It's the
grocery
same
store.
way. No, it's the same way in the United States. It's the same way in the UK where I lived. It's the same way in Germany when I visited. It's the same way, all pretty much every single country I've been
And
to.
no one's
They
complaining,
make you
Jacob.
and they make you tip for it as well. Like
And tip for
you're
it. Oh, God's sake,
I
yeah.
actually I should be commenting on this because this is what I just did early in the morning today when I went out and I noticed I didn't have any coffee. I went to get some coffee. I had to package it myself. Then the machine started malfunctioning, and I had to fix it myself. And I scanned it. I pressed my card to it. I waited for it to finish, and then it asked me to tip for the work that I did.
Unbelievable. So you're not only the technician, the
Yes,
counter hand serving
yes.
yourself,
The customer.
and on top of it all, you didn't put the main factor in there as well, besides the tip, the price gouging, the extortion, the
Yeah,
extreme inflation. It's happened at the same time. I mean, at least put the prices up, give us a break, and then make us pack our own shopping bags. But they've done it all at once. It's not surprising that people go home and do just sit and decide to melt in front of Netflix. We're all so
yeah,
fucking exhausted from
absolutely.
putting the petrol pump in and then going to pay and then thanking them and then being asked at the counter, would you like a Snickers for $2? No, I don't want a fucking Snickers. I saw it. I'm trying to avoid all this information overload. You're already price gouging me at the fucking petrol pump. I had to do all the work myself, not like the old guy in the 50s that did it with a smile for you and fucking, gave your missus a bit of a kiss occasionally on the side. We're doing it all. We're not getting paid. They
Yes.
want a tip.
Yeah,
And we wonder why we want to go home and just take a bunch of Panadols and watch Netflix. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah,
exactly.
it's insane. The world's insane that we live in. The people, if they don't want to do something, if they choose to be dumbed down by it, controlled by it, and doing three times the work they did last decade, so be it. If they don't want to be radical, don't want to speak up, they don't have to be Karen, very angry at the counter asking for the manager, but you should at least write to your politicians. You should at least write to the big bosses of these companies and say,
Right.
not having it. I'm not having it. And if I am having it, you're bringing the fucking cost down for me. So
Right.
people, if they don't want to do the change, don't do it. Don't do it, but live with the consequences of
Hmm.
doing the overwork. The overwork.
Yeah, that's really, an insightful take on how the average everyday person thinks about it. I wanted to tie some stuff of this in because particularly when you mentioned like the Snickers bar, I began thinking there's a lot of like cashiers in stores that I noticed, and they're just forced to plug this stuff in. And I guess we can tie this back into the notion of everybody's a sellout that you mentioned. Like even I, when I put forward this interview, like I'll be turning ads onto it, so we might just have a clip of you saying that, and then immediately cuts to an ad for Snickers. Now that we've mentioned it. So, the world can go in many, many ways, but ultimately, as much as you
Yeah.
may want to express yourself, you have to work within these certain constraints, and unfortunately, you're limited by them. But I think when it comes to like these huge corporations who manage these stores and whatnot, that's the way they're screwing everybody over because you mentioned
Yeah.
why does everybody want to go home and take I don't know, a bottle of paracetamol and watch streaming services. Why does everybody want to do that? Well, it's because they get frustrated at the store. What's more
Yeah.
ironic is that the same investors are probably on the board of the store, on the board of the streaming service, and when one goes up, the other goes down. They still profit. So
Yeah, the
I think
monster just keeps,
yeah.
getting hungrier and hungrier. Oh, look, on that notion of plug, I think you mentioned something about a book and music earlier. So
Hmm.
I'm happy to say that the job I do is an enjoyable one, as yours appears to be, presenting online and being an influencer or a commentator, I should say,
Hmm.
on new media. So yeah, let's plug my book, not Snickers bars. So
Of
do you want
course.
to talk?
Of course. Please feel free to tell us all about it. I believe it could
Well,
come
we
out
were
of
talking
your
about how
mouth better
well,
than
we were talking
yours.
about how it's important to sort of chip away at traditionalism, and I've always done that even in the pop life. And every time I've gone to interview a musician and
Hmm.
an actor, but let's talk music, a musician, I've always sort of thought if I want to know about the record itself, I'll read the press release from the record company. What I really want to know about are their thoughts on sexuality, religion, politics, change in society, technology, etc., etc. So I looked back at 30 years of talking to virtually every pop star on the planet, and I've gone, well, which ones really had something to say? And I compiled it into a 50 interview anthology called There's Your Quote. No, that was the first book. Second one, my latest one, is Conversations with Culture Icons.
I saw that. I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, so this book is interesting because each artist almost has something to offer in so far as inspiring words about any given subject, like the ones I aforementioned. Funnily enough, here's one I prepared earlier. Uh, so the book's
There you
there,
go.
and it's sort of very glamorous looking with its giant AI
I
pair of
immediately
lips,
noticed it. It's the first thing that I was looking at that entire time. Next to
right?
the rest of your excellently color-coded books. I especially love when people do that.
It's all, the thing is, I noticed on your podcast, a lot of your guys and interview subjects or people you're chatting with, because I understand it's it's a dialogue and panel and conversation. They go for the more, I suppose, neutral tones, and I think that's a good thing to do when videos are looked at down the line. You go, oh, how nice this could appear. Me, I've got to go the color, I've got to go the pop, and so I thought I'll give you a colorful backdrop there. But the book's
Beautiful.
great because I think it talks about sexuality, gender, all of the above that we've talked about, but it does it in a kind of uh, a radical way, not that sort of Rolling Stone, let's get serious about how many beats per minute we're in this dance song. None of that. The consumer knows how to look that up on the internet today. I think what's important is being told by Patti Smith how to get rid of a common cold, or being
Mhm.
told by Nick Cave his thoughts on sort of a soul or religion or questioning sexuality with Kylie Minogue, gender and drag with RuPaul, witchcraft and politics with Tori Amos, and
That
that's what
sounds
this book
interesting.
does. Yeah,
That one sounds
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what I found, Jacob, is that it took a life of its own, and these chapters were placing themselves a bit like a fellow writer and a friend and mutual friend of ours, Kelly Catlin, did, I think, when she was writing a book on Kurt Cobain.
Yes.
You sort of know the subject so well that a certain almost witchcraft and sorcery comes along and it helps you out. And it's positioned these chapters so that by the time you finish reading about Nick Cave and Kylie Minogue, the Kylie interview comes in and she talks about sex and gender and all of that. And then Kylie ends about RuPaul. And then the RuPaul interview opens and he's at the podium presenting an award with Kylie Minogue at the Grammys and all of this. And I thought, wow, how did that happen? And then at the end of the book, it rolls into Charlie XCX and a lot more modern artists.
Of
And
course.
I suppose you hit a wall, which I would say is the state of popular music now, where everything is AI'd, everything is homogenous, and it questions where do we go from here with pop culture and with music in general, and what happens to the legacy of those artists like Tori Amos, like Laurie Anderson? Do they have to be forced like Morrissey to sell their works to the devil? Or will they hold on to it and have something real to keep as a form of art for future generations to appreciate?
Yeah, I think if your book touches upon those themes, then it truly is somewhat of a commentary on the authenticity of art and culture. Not only so much as the actual views of the people that represent these specific albums or works of art, but really what their intentions are and how well they intersect with what we actually see. Like, do we actually know the person behind the project? Something like that.
Mm,
That's the
mm.
that's the vibe that I'm sensing.
Yeah, I mean, a good example would be the Beatles. I mean, I find them so sacred, and every word that came from John Lennon and Paul McCartney to me
Mm.
was biblical and is biblical. They sold their rights to Michael Jackson, who,
Yes.
well, not directly. Before Michael Jackson was actually a Perth, West Australian rich man named Rupert Holmes at Court family here in WA, Perth, WA. And had no idea in the 80s when I was a teenager that we had the rights to the Beatles songs here in Perth. But then Michael Jackson came to town and bought them off this rich dude. So it swaps hands all the time. So I don't think it necessarily then does change. You know, we have faith that it doesn't necessarily ruin the art for the rest of us and the commentary for the rest of us. And let's hope that in the near future, the corporations buying up art and dishing it out via AI. Let's hope it doesn't do any damage. Yeah.
For sure.
Mm, mm,
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely an important part of it.
yeah.
But you also spoke about being a man of many hats, and that also makes me want to ask you, since we just finished talking about your most recent book, rather than spiraling onto your other writing adventures, because as an author, I'm sure I can tell how often that exhausting it is to compare all of your works in one given go. You talked earlier to me about your album. Would you like to begin to tell me a little bit more about that? Because I was curious towards the beginning, but I wanted to sort of ask my most important questions and have that discussion first.
Sure, sure. Let's get the serious politics out of the way and then the pop in the end. But I had to make a record. Through the years in this industry, you'd come home with friends from a record launch or something, and you're all in this vibey mood after a few Millers and beers, and you kind of go, right, let's record stuff. And in this internet age, we're all recording things. So I thought, I've got all this material. Why don't I do something with it? And there are moments where I've just sung like an idiot, perhaps, or sometimes my voice was surprisingly good. Times when friends have said things that were hilarious and we had it on tape or video. And I've somehow managed to go through it all, edit it all, and organically, really, create a record that has music and spoken word and commentary on, all of the above. The biggest subjects on it would be queer culture, the visibility of it, the deconstruction of gender. And the second thing would be the farce of advertising. There's a lot of kitsch and camp, old style 50s adverts that are sampled and scratched in and out of the record. Everything from Camel cigarettes being pushed by doctors to, makeup creams that have been tested with nuclear content. Really phenomenal stuff if you look at the history of advertising. But I thought, let's pop it up, make it fun. And so I made a record called A Queer Rhetoric. And
Mm,
that's not me on the cover. I'll take the shiny bit off so you can see it on camera. Uh, it's a dude that just thought, looking like he's conducting an imaginary orchestra, which is really
yeah.
what the record does. I'm not really making music. Somehow my partner managed to make a piano sound good, and somehow this sample sounded raw and organic like a real drum. But I borrow from U2, from Depeche Mode, from the Beatles, and I just bring all of this content, audio content, into one record. And in the end, the story it tells is really one about the farce of advertising, the joke of public relations, the seriousness of pop idolism, and one serious subject, and that is to muddle with gender and to not take it so seriously. So yeah, that's the record I made, and I'll send you, as a personal favor, a few tracks for you to listen to, if not a link to where you can hear it, because
Awesome. That'd be
you know
amazing.
these days, when you're popping in your earbuds and you're picking up new nuances in music sometimes, and you're
No,
going,
of course.
God, you know what I mean? The echoes and
Yeah.
the reverb. A lot of that's in there. And I think that's what music should be, an adventure and a lot of fun for the listener, not just the same repetitive techno stuff. Mm,
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with you on that note.
yeah.
I think as far as music goes, I don't know how much you'd agree because obviously you have some expertise with not only doing a lot of this work where you're often meeting people in the music industry, but you're also familiar with different genres of music itself, from the more electronic types to the more classical, oh, well, I wouldn't term it classical music, but the oldies, so to say,
Yeah.
as we would say, stuff like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, stuff of
Mm,
that generation. And when we think of stuff like that, I believe you'd be more inclined to agree with me when I say that. We often see a trend where something takes off and we see 1,000 copycats of that thing. It's just recycled versions of what worked before because people liked it. And then you
mm,
just see entire copycat bands, entire copycat albums, bands that have like a one-hit wonder, and then they start making stuff similar to it because they know their other work won't take off and it's
yeah.
more profitable. We see stuff like that. And it's entirely funny to me how in situations like that we can still have a sort of environment where people get inspired and where they
Mm,
draw from multiple different sources rather than, as you said, the repeated techno sounds that we often so hear in everyday music when we're driving or on the radio or on Spotify or whatever. Where it's just the same stuff being repeated over and over again because it worked commercially before. And that ties in a lot of the stuff that we talked about before. But I'm glad that not only when it comes to Cream Magazine, but also to your music, not to like slurp on your spaghetti too much, or for the lack of a better phrase. But I believe that with a lot of this stuff, you can see like an overarching theme of not necessarily trying to stray away from what is being promulgated for the media, but trying to blend all of these sorts of genres together. That's what I
mm,
saw in Cream Magazine. Because, by the way, I love the fact that the website feels like it was like made in like 2013, 2014, because that's the first time that I began like sort of learning on the side like how to make websites, how they work. And I remember
yeah.
seeing a lot of these like early tutorial websites and trying to code in HTML, and it's exactly what I came up with, something like the Cream Magazine
Yeah,
website.
yeah.
The
And to
part
me,
where it
that's
says,
cleaner. Yeah. The pixelation was shit back then, but
yeah,
the actual viewing experience was cleaner. We didn't have so many pop-up windows like you do now.
absolutely,
6 requests for subscriptions. You go read Vogue or even Rolling Stone. It's a mess. TMZ is a perfect example of
yeah,
vomit on the monitor.
TMZ
You have
definitely.
not seen more crap than TMZ online. how people have desensitized themselves so much to be able to read an article on a website like that is beyond my belief. I don't know. So cream is more of a static looking thing, as you say, and
Yeah.
goes harks back to the past. In fact, I'd go back even a few decades earlier. The aesthetic itself is taking on quite a 50s look. My every time I
Yeah.
do a AI illustration, it's
They're
got
like
to
50s.
yeah, the demand is illustration 1950s style because people are going to want to, if they don't already, want a cleaner, quieter space to sit down on a Sunday and maybe read that magazine online for an hour. And every week that comic strip will change, the main stories will change. So I'd rather giving it a weekly vibe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than this out there every second
Yeah,
of the
every
day.
single second, breaking
Everyone's
news story,
yeah,
live
yeah.
reporting,
It,
yeah.
it's
And
too much. We can't cope, and we're in the media.
yeah.
Imagine the non-media trained people, you in the
Hmm.
sciences, me in the arts. Uh, Imagine how much overload and what it's
Hmm.
going to do to them. I think we will, the pendulum will swing, and people are going to go, I want something easy, clean, funny, light to read. And I hope to be on the cusp of that, and that people will be more and more drawn to it.
Yeah, man. I like the part where it was just like, this is something that I did myself many, many years ago and reminded me of it, where there was like a little audio bar and it was just like, here's some music you can listen while scrolling the website. And I was just like, I did this. Like, this was my, I thought this was my idea, but you did the same thing.
So sue me, but I think that's good too because it brings that immersive,
Yeah,
interactive
it
element.
does. I've always like sort of liked that idea of there also being sound on these empty ass web pages because instead of getting sound every single time I click on a news article rather than listening to something, I just get enter your email to subscribe now, 15% off to continue viewing the article when I'm midway through scrolling it and reading it and just
Yeah, and
pisses
people
me
will get
off.
sick of it. People will get sick of that, I think.
I do believe
You and I,
so.
yeah, and we're too, our time is too precious to waste, and we don't want to get RSI constantly
Yeah,
pushing
yeah,
buttons.
but
And
but but
oh,
as
here's yeah, go
yeah,
on.
yeah, but as I wanted to say and I was heading for, I noticed with Cream Magazine, the main distinguishing factor, the same thing that I noticed with all your works, as I was saying, where it's just the drawing from all these different sources, is that every single article is about something completely different. Like, I swear,
Mm.
like, I saw something, I can't exactly recall what, but I do believe it was relating to an album of some sort. And I scrolled a bit down, and it's on cooking. So immediately I'm skipping through an entirely different like segment and skill, and it's
Yeah,
all just in there. And I feel like every single time I have to navigate a big website, I have to skip in between sections, and every single section has like 10 options. And it's the same way that I find with a lot of social media websites where there's like too many buttons, and I just sort of don't want to participate in it anymore.
I
That's sort
know.
of what's happening.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to be snobby about what content you put on your site either, because I might do a piece on air fryers and what the best snacks are, or a piece on the 10 best fast foods to eat after a music festival hangover.
Yeah.
But that's not going to stop me from writing about one of the nicest restaurants to dine in New York. So
Yeah.
I think we're in an age now where there is no classism. So to be able to put that and to be able to just put something about food in a magazine that you might have thought was just about pop culture, I think is something that I always wanted to do, and I think it's something that a reader would enjoy because we do all have these aspects in our lives. In fact, we're probably listening to a record while we're making a meal in the kitchen anyway. So, it's part of
Yeah.
pop culture, So,
It's
yeah.
definitely like I feel like multitasking is a big thing. It
I'm
always has
glad you
been,
picked up
especially
on
for
all those
me.
departments. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good to
yeah.
hear.
Yeah, no, no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
For me, it definitely has been. But no. So I wanted to ask you like a quick few questions. I had some written down that I especially wanted to touch with you on, like, and I believe we didn't have as much time in the beginning because we got into a very fascinating discussion. First of all, this isn't written on the Word article, but are you perhaps wearing a Japanese Joy Division shirt?
I can't believe you can see. I thought only the top part was
I
there.
was like,
Uh,
yeah, I was like peeking at the top part, and it was I just saw some Japanese text, and I'm like, okay, I don't read this, and then
yeah,
I see
yeah,
like the top of the album of the Waves album cover. I'm just like,
that's
wait,
right.
is it? And I just keep looking at it. I just keep looking at it. I'm like, yeah, this just is the album, but it says the text in Japanese.
That's right. And it's red, not black and white, because I
Where'd
think
you get it?
oh, I think I got it on one of those Chinese websites.
Oh,
Cost
okay,
a few
cool.
bucks. Yeah, yeah. I don't want to say the name of it because I don't want to procreate those
Yes, of
sites,
course. No, no,
but
no.
it might have been AliExpress or something. But yeah, yeah, and I think that's precisely what we've been talking about for most of this chat.
Yeah.
That taking something classic. My chihuahua's going crazy. Ringo, come here. Even my dog's name is ripping off the Beatles, Ringo.
There you
So
go.
he's coming to say hello. But yeah, taking something classic, and the Japanese used to do it a lot in the 1980s. They take Western culture.
Oh, beautiful dog.
That's Ringo. Say hello. You're on TV. Say hello. And basically what they do is they bastardize it, if not just praise it through a different perspective. And great, you picked up that it was Joy Division, and it sort of confirms what we questioned earlier. I think, Jacob, will the damaging or the breaking down of that original art damage the message? And I don't think it does, because you knew exactly what it was by seeing the Japanese writing and a fraction of the main image on the t-shirt.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know what I mean? So kudos to your perspective and perception of
You
pop
listen to it
culture.
so many times and then you kind of recognize it. But no, tying back into the music and whatnot, I just wanted to ask, how does it feel when your job sort of revolves around this blend between music in of itself and then culture? Because we tend to think of these as very much the same things, and I don't want to rest too much on the jargon here, but we tend to think of music as just, something that we listen to on the radio. It's just a form of self-expression. It's something that we all get very big into when we're in our teens or in our 20s, and then it slowly fades away, or, you start a band and whatnot. It's a whole segment of culture that we think is being separate from everything else. And then we think of culture in of itself as a whole, and then we think
One
of stuff
second,
like
my dog's
politics.
going. One second, Jacob.
Of course.
Ringo, I'm doing an interview. Not time to get angry at your dog. Oh, he wants to get angry at his dog. Continue that question. Yeah.
This is exactly what the magic of editing is for. Don't worry about it. But no, I was saying that culture is often seen as this whole thing with like politics and news and current events and stuff. So how does it feel when you have to juggle those two? I mean, especially when you're with your work in radio, which I know you said that you've ceased to do in recent weeks. You began recording your own stuff, but it's nonetheless fascinating because it's definitely something that you touch upon, especially when you have to do
Mm,
research for your own books. You
mm.
you very much draw upon the conclusions that you made throughout that entire career. So tell me a bit more about how it feels like juggling music and then current events and culture.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, I think I get the politics into the popular culture stories
Yep.
through satire and through comedy. I think politics becomes more, and by politics I mean sexual politics and commercial and governmental politics. It becomes more interesting and palatable when it's in the form of something comedic,
Yeah.
or something pretty or something colorful. And I personally only want to read about it if it's on an attractive medium, a good website, and if the words themselves are almost poetic
Yep.
and have flow to them. Even if I'm writing about, Trump versus Biden or Kamala Harris or whatever, I will still use the poetic rules of alliteration and onomatopoeia and things like that to give a sense of being there to the reader, not just stating the facts. And to me, color in prose and writing and news is just as important as the content itself, so long as the correct content is in there. Mm.
hmm Yeah.
And
No,
the
no. I
and
definitely,
and the
I
message
can
is in there.
definitely see.
But the balancing of it all, I think you might have been asking there as well. How do you get film? TV and all. How do I change hats? Maybe is what you were
Hmm.
asking.
Yes,
Is that
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah? Um, just having gone to enough things and events. I went to Sydney in 1994, and by 1997, I had started my own magazine at the age of 27, and
Mhm.
it was up against all of the commercial traditionalist media, and I didn't care. I didn't bat an eyelid. I wasn't intimidated. And then eventually you were taking advertisers from your Murdochs and your Packers and your Fairfaxes, and you're affecting their advertising sales and circulation. And you've got this coffee table magazine whose ethos is break the establishment, deconstruct, down with traditionalism. And it becomes a part of a culture that's starting to happen simultaneously. It's happening in film, independent film started
Mhm.
picking up at the time. Independent grunge music was starting to pick up at the time. And all of these marginal groups were happening and becoming to the fore through the independent media like Cream magazine. And as a force, your Vices, your Creams, etc., just it wasn't planned. You don't have a board meeting of independent publishers saying, and now the directive is we want to push Aboriginality. It's not like that. You
Yeah.
just have your belief. Mine were queer politics, and someone else has their belief and might be feminist. Someone else is very pro-environment. Someone else more for black rights. And you just did it all simultaneously, that there was almost a military of independence coming forward throughout the mid to the end of the 90s. Then, fortunately, the internet came along and we could share that more on a mass scale. And now you've got the traditionalist media clamoring to know the secret to that difference, independence, radicalism, and how to make it pretty and how to make it funny and how to make it attractive. And they have no idea, because the last time I looked at a newspaper online, I couldn't find the article. And like you said, it stops halfway and their paywall is demanding. So they're in a mess and we're
Mm.
still at it. And
Yep.
while we're at it and we're in this mess, I'll keep having fun with it. And as for much as the information, where it all came from, I've just been to dozens of hundreds of record launches and film previews and private parties by pop stars, and I've seen every level of business in the media industry
Hmm.
enough to put on whatever hat I think I want to, and discuss whatever subject I'd need to. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Dude, that's insane. I have no comments. I have no words. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. And then I like how you touched upon how in my previous comment and how a lot of the articles online are just like they stop midway through. And I do believe my generation is slowly getting tired of it. That's why you see a lot of people coming into these alternative platforms. They don't really like reading from big major sources. When a big story breaks out, we look towards the major sources and then we look at the headline and then we're just like, oh, okay, that happened. And then we look the phrase up on whatever social media platform we're using at the
Mm.
moment.
And go to the
And then
magazines
we
you
get someone to
trust to tell
summarize it
their
to us.
story. Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
go to the publications that you trust or get joy from reading. You know, in the 70s, they used to actually smoke in news studios. The newsreader would sit
I
there
miss
smoking.
that on airplanes, yeah.
And on airplanes, exactly, exactly. The shit they got away with back in the day, unbelievable. To
No,
have lived,
I can't believe how strict the laws are now, especially in the United States, because I get the public health concerns and whatnot, but the fact that you can't smoke just about anywhere in public makes it seem like it's this unholy thing that you shouldn't, like, thou shalt not smoke, and it seems very authoritarian in a sense, because it's such a like a small, irrelevant thing, but it's almost like a symbolism of something greater. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
no, I
But
mean,
but every time you try to light up a cigarette and it's you're around people, you get like weird stares now, and it's just like I feel like I don't know, like I feel like I'm an Italian in New York in the 1870s. Like this is what this is must have felt like.
yeah, a real outcast or ostracized.
Yeah.
Uh, Even vaping in Australia, the big tobacco is trying to ban so that
Yeah, they
everyone
just
does.
got rid of disposable vapes in the UK. They just banned them.
Mm. Same here. But the thing is, I had nicotine in my system as a young kid because it was decadent and all over the place. You mentioned earlier, well, that it was allowed on planes. Doctors were promoting the damn thing. So
Yeah,
poor little me has got nicotine in his system. So
yeah,
once a day, I like to treat myself to a ciggy, and I thought,
absolutely. Well, then you have something to look forward to, and I'm honored that you chose your daily Siggy to be right here on the show. I have a few
and I
more
also,
questions. Yeah, go on.
yeah, I wanted to hark back to the times when they'd sit smoking cigarettes in studios.
No, I miss those times. Definitely if I ever have well, two things. If I ever have enough money to afford a full-time studio and interview guests in real time, I'll just have like a giant sign that says smoking permitted. And second of all, once I'm dictator of the world, some hopeful day, I'll just get rid of all those smoking, no smoking signs all around the place that like dirty it up. Because
Live like a
when I'm at
Russian.
a
No,
beach
don't
and
say
it's
that.
covering the sunset, it's like ridiculous. You're just taking the joy out of life. Like
Yeah,
I have a right, and it's like in the land of the free as well. Could you imagine? Like I have a right
and,
to hurt myself. Let
yeah,
me.
and by the very fucking institutions that are feeding us this shit and making us addicted to it, then they turn it around and say you can't have it anymore. So they're driving us insane with their nicotine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so fuck it, I'm having it on television.
Absolutely. No, it's you see this everywhere. You see this with like weed being highly illegal, and then alcohol is perfectly legal while it kills people on the road, like 100,000 around the world every single year. It's insane numbers, and you don't. People rely so much on things like the law and modern institutions, but then I feel like, particularly at my age, like that, this is the age where you start noticing, which is why I'm so passionate about it, why that a lot of the stuff around you is just arbitrary, that the rules you got taught from when you were a kid are not necessarily the rules that have always been in place, that 50 years ago things were different. And you go down this spiral of where you're just like, this is bullshit. And then 20 years later, as you said, you're just like, well, this is bullshit, but I might as well go along with it, sorta,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, and for health reasons, smoking in general is bad. But
Yeah, of course.
let's not delve
Obviously,
into
yeah.
another tangent area. But I think the thing about rules and the thing about institutions, the thing about control, the thing about being a part of a system, which we've used the word of a few times,
Many
you
times,
can't
especially me.
defy it, you can't fight it, you can only to a certain degree, and the best thing to do is to play with it, not embrace it wholeheartedly, but use it to your
Mhm.
advantage and to the advantage of your loved ones, as well as to the world at large, the environment, all of the above. But don't break the rules, just bend them so that you are a survivor, is
Yeah.
my main goal.
I
Yeah.
think that would be an excellent motto to live by. And I just wanted to ask a couple quick questions before we end here. So, perhaps this is a bit more of a cheesy question, but I was curious that if you could interview a musician, let's say any musician alive or dead, who do you imagine that you would end up picking?
John Lennon.
Instant answer, no,
Instant.
no
I didn't even,
repercussions.
I've never asked, never been asked that before, but I would, that's just what first came to mind. Definitely John Lennon. Yeah. He
John
did the
Lennon?
same thing that we've been talking about. He turned message into poetry, often toward the surrealist level of
Hmm.
poetry. And if you were smart enough, you picked up what he was saying and you acted on it.
Yeah,
And I think going back to conspiracy theories, the guy was murdered by
yeah.
not just the dude that killed him.
The dude with the
So
catcher in the rye in his bag, yeah, no.
say that again.
The dude
Oh yeah,
with the
Catcher in the Rye.
yeah,
Yeah, Catcher
yeah.
in the Rye. That's it was all too many symbols in that whole story that didn't make sense and yet made sense.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I'd say to anyone watching this that does have a conspiracy theory belief, delve more into it and you'll find you're probably right.
Yeah, conspiracy theories are only conspiracy theories in as far as, you don't have enough evidence yet to prove them. And then when you get the evidence, then they're no longer conspiracy theories, they're just the truth. I remember when
Yeah.
people used to speculate about like, well, the government is trying mind experiments on people during the Cold War, and then people were just like, what are you talking about? That's bullshit. And then
Yeah.
2 or 3 decades later, the government admits that they were trying mind control experiments during the Cold War. And it's just sort of like, it's like
What's
you
that?
kind of could have told, but you didn't want to say it out loud because then, you would be suspicious, whatnot, stuff like that.
Well,
And
the
it
thing
happened
is,
all over the world, but
do
just to
you want
delve
to
back,
you know those things, right? You don't
yeah.
think they're happening en masse now, though? That the mind experiments are happening with the algorithm per
My
se?
lawyer, my lawyer advises me to say that nothing is happening en masse and that the government is treating us all entirely correctly. But no, 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 no. I'm sure you can guess my opinion on that. But back to John Lennon, believe he definitely parroted a lot of the same surrealist themes that you were talking about, and I believe that his murder was an awful thing, and there's like a lot of missing pieces there from just studying the history of the Beatles. I could have learned as much and how particularly influential they are in our culture. I remember back in Liverpool, I was visiting the bar when where they all first played. And there was also a lot of monuments to them dedicated in Hamburg, where they first practiced before they actually had formed a band. And of course, you had John Lennon with the Quarrymen before starting the Beatles, and there was a lot of work that was prior to that. You can see his like entire evolution as a person, and that all led up to him being giving his name to my favorite airport. There's an airport in Liverpool named John Lennon International Airport, which is where the
Oh,
Beatles are around
I,
the same area in England. And
I didn't know
it's a
that.
very small airport where you can easily get around without the security harassing your ass, which is
Yeah,
why I absolutely love that airport. And they have a convenience store right outside of like pretty much every single gate. Like they put them there so you don't have to walk across the entire line. Because in American airports, sorry, bit of a tangent. In American airports, you have fucking jewelry stores right across from like the gate. I'm not gonna buy a diamond watch while I'm heading out for like a $400 economy flight. I don't know what these people are thinking. Like they have
yeah,
actual like electronic stores in the airport, whereas in England, I think they're a lot more sensible with just like bookstores and in Europe in general and like little like convenience
yeah.
stores where you can buy a sandwich. That's much more sensible than what they have over in the United States, where it's all just like, oh, we're gonna sell this, property to the highest bidder, and then I'll sell the stuff at the airport. And imagine you want to buy jewelry, then what? You're gonna buy a plane ticket so that you can get in that part. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I
Whatever.
think
John
airports.
Lennon International Airport doesn't have any of that, and I loved it for that reason.
I'm going to check that out when I'm next in Liverpool. The thing is, airports, I think they're in a universe of their own. It's like going through time zone when you're
Yes,
in an episode of the time zone. Every airport around the world is a bit warped in that sense.
absolutely.
Yeah. And you're sort of stuck there in a way. So I think that captive audience is why the jewelry sellers think you will shout 4,000 because maybe the bloke that had the affair on the holiday island you've just come back from is feeling so goddamn guilty, he'll buy the $4,000 watch for his wife. So maybe that's something that's happening at airports. I don't
That'd be a nice
know.
story to tell, going up to the jeweler, being like, "Yeah, I just cheated on my wife. What's the best ring to get my wife so that she forgives me? Or it shows that she preemptively forgives me when she finds out I had an affair." It's wonderful. No, this kinds of stuff they get away with in those liminal spaces are particularly interesting, at the airports and stuff. But the architecture is also nice. I don't know how this dealt from John Lennon, but I immediately made that association, and
Yeah, yeah,
and
just
they
the
they
name of
have
the
like an airport
airport.
in Nevada where they have like there's like an underground section. They have like a statue of like Baphomet like holding up like a wand with like goat horns, and people were like saying it's like a satanic airport. And it just turns out that the guy that like designed the airport just had a real big thing for like pagan symbolism. It's insane. It's like a lot of the stuff that you see around us. Like it's so rare that you think about these correlations, but it definitely has a lot of correlations with like artsy bullshit. So I would say like very very
Yeah,
niche
yeah.
subcultures, and you see their influence all over the place, especially even in like small places like architecture where it's just surrounded by like business folks that don't really think about these sorts of things because they don't have time. They're like the rest of us where they just want to go home. and
Yeah.
you look very closely, and from an outsider's perspective, particularly when it comes to university buildings, in my experience, you can find like, wait, somebody like really thought about this. This isn't just like a random place that I'm stuck in.
Yeah. And that's good because we were heading towards in modernist age, we were heading towards this homogeneous practicality that
Yes.
kept everything looking quite mundane. So I think introducing art into corporate spaces is a great thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the brutalist architecture and those cartoons where it's like, have you ever seen those like corporate cartoons where it's like they don't have faces, it's just like the color of their face, and they have
No.
just a single color for their hair, and then just a single color for their clothes. They're like stickmen, but they're not really stickmen, and it's
Right.
like very oversimplified like corporate art. When you go on a lot of these like modern websites, every single time there's like a graphic, even like articles in of themselves, they just don't put detail on anything anymore. It's like the company's simplifying their logos year by year by year by year. They're doing the
I
same thing with a lot of just like promo pages and social media pages now, and it tears at the eyes.
Yeah.
Simplification of anything like too far too much of a degree is not good, and I think that's why a lot of the people like. Famous artists and music artists like the Beatles, particularly, or the Rolling Stones, or the Smiths, people in that era. I mean, totally different eras, like 60s, 70s, 80s. But let's think about this for a second. They definitely had like a highlight of their own because their work meant something. They had an underlying message to every single track that they produced. They actually sat and thought about this. Whereas what we're confronted at every single day is stuff that is bleak and mundane. And while you may
Mm,
not like, the work of John Lennon, or some people may not like his messaging or the way he gets information across, some people just don't like him as a person, for personal reasons or biographical reasons or whatnot. But even political reasons or social reasons for commentary. But we think about all these things. People may not like a particular person, but the fact that a work of theirs has substance, the fact that it's saying something is impressive enough for
mm,
a lot of people. And I think
mm.
that's definitely worth touching upon that. Back in the day, we used to have things that existed with meaning.
Yeah. With meaning, did you say?
With meaning, yeah.
Meaning, yeah, yeah. I mean, as a postmodernist student myself, the main subtext of postmodernism is that everything is losing its meaning,
Yeah.
uh, and the medium is the message anyway. So you call it had this dichotomous sort of motto to postmodernism. And funny that because when I am stoned, I suddenly get all very Marshall McLuhan on my own ass, and everything in front of me is the actual this right now
Yeah.
is the message in front of me. And ironically, it's me looking at a screen of you within a screen, and then on top of it is the sort of zoom screen of me, and around it is Aaron Wright. In the middle under you is a Sergeant Pepper illustration with a
Lovely.
moustache and a bunch of files and folders all pushed to the edge of my monitor. And I'm going, fuck, this is just everything we've just talked about. You know what I mean?
You're gonna
Everything
make me
I
have an
do,
existential crisis with all the mugs that I'm surrounded by as well.
all the what? The mugs?
All the mugs and different kinds of bottles and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
even want to consider that in my peripheral vision. Now I can't help but not ignore it. It's like the moment where you see your nose and you can't really like, yeah,
No,
when someone says that you're breathing manually and you begin to think about your breath and it gets haywire.
absolutely. And just on that note, we can go forward in this age with that Zen meets Marshall McLuhanist message about the medium itself being the message. But if you go too far, I think you're getting too analytical. And if you get too
Yep.
analytical, you can go off the deep end. So take it easy, I think,
Yeah.
in this age, all of
That's
us. And
definitely not good as well to go off the deep end, to take things too seriously. It comes back
no,
to
you
the
can do
idea
your
where we
head.
talked about the beginning, where I expressed my opinion that it's better to verge on the part of being too, on the nose, on the cheek, being too humorous and not taking things seriously enough than it is to be a person who takes everything seriously and takes everything personal.
Yeah, absolutely. To desensitize yourself to everything from the notion of cancer to the notion of dystopian end of the world to the government are watching us. You've got to take it all and you've got to go, well, what if? And then how would I cope? And how is my mind coping with that? And I think as individuals and smart individuals and pragmatic individuals, we can do it.
Yeah. One more question, totally different topic. Verging back from the musician question and into pop culture again, which you said that we would end it with. What's the pop shop, your store?
Oh God, as if another hat. That's my selling shop. Someone
Nice.
told me that the new media in the 20s, we'd have to monetize by
In the
selling
20s. The fact that
links.
you're referring to it as the 20s is
Because it's
go
already
on,
going to be
please.
old. By the time 1930 hits, this is the 20s, mate. And so I think they're all selling out and they're all selling links. Even Cream Magazine sells links to
Yeah.
other websites as SEO,
Yeah, of
benefit as
course.
well as to make a buck. And so we're all selling our soul. And I thought, well, F that. I think I'll, literally sell some pop culture merchandise. So I sell everything from ceramic mugs to cute pins and brooches, um, all with a pop culture connection. Yeah, the pop shop.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, you seem to have so many hats. That's always wonderful to hear. I think
yeah,
going back to the very first topic that we discussed in this gigantic conversation that we've just had,
yeah.
it's better to have many mugs rather than just one and get screwed out of it by Big Brother, whoever is watching, right?
From that note, you want to see my mug? I will end it with a view of my mug cupboard.
Beautiful. Show me.
Yeah, I'll bring you to it. This every morning, I see what mood I'm feeling, and I decide this is what I feel. I'm feeling a bit Looney Tunes today, or I'm feeling a bit sort of Beatles, or I want to push my magazine and focus on Cream. Or if I'm feeling a bit sort of monstrous, I get The Exorcist and I just get the evil out of me.
You have a
So
whole collection.
basically, yes. Now my
I like how
battery's
you I
running.
like how you have the Cream magazine mug as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh God, yeah. I promote
How
it
many
even
of those are in
stronger.
existence?
What was that?
How many of those are in existence, do you suppose?
Oh, these are all made on demand, as things should be. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So what happens if you break one of them? Do you have to make them order them on demand
yeah, and
once again?
probably change it, and probably change it. I like change, lots of change. So it becomes a new logo,
Well, you can
or
always get one for the new logo next year. Just don't be like those evil companies that keep simplifying their logo every single year, right?
no. I think that silhouette concept you were talking about, Apple did it with their.
Silhouette concept entirely.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I
Apple.
think that they just want to put
Exactly.
everyone in the picture. Like, put yourself in here, whoever you are, buy our phone, buy our phone, buy our phone, and I won't fall for it. I like some intrinsic design
Yeah,
aspect.
it's
Yeah,
wild.
my battery's
Uh,
sort of going. You
Yeah,
can
no,
plug
I
in.
was just about
Yeah.
to just comment. We've had a very long and extended discussion. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch upon or sort of say regarding the topics that we touched upon? Because I believe as far as my questions go, without me even having to ask most of them were answered, and it's very rare that we have a guest on and so very quickly we began to like sketch out an actual view like of all the stuff they've done and how it all intersects and connects to itself. But with you, it was fairly easy. So as for the many hats comment, it's not so many hats if all the hats are interconnected, and then you see like the same pretty much theme flowing from one to the other. And with you, Antonino, I particularly noticed that the same theme that you have sort of going through Cream magazine, where it's just like from the one thing to the next to the next to the next with the same kind of humorous tone. You seem to have with your writing as well. You mentioned that your book was an anthology, and
Yes.
that's perfect because that's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And then you think about what an album is. An album is an anthology as well. So you're a very anthological person. I don't know if anybody has ever
But
told
I
you.
will say, and I will proudly admit, I don't think anything I do or have done is absolutely original. And I think I'm made and built for these times where nothing is absolutely original because
Absolutely.
all my life, yeah, I've had practice of taking from the past,
Hmm.
blending it and making it something nice for the present.
Right.
And I've done that with the magazine. I've done that with the music. I've done that with the pop shop. I've done that with lots of things, the anthology. And I think that's gift to myself because I like to remember. I'm very nostalgic, and also a gift to myself in that it presents everything in a new light, and a gift to the reader to see something or hear something in a slightly different or very different mode
Nice.
rather than the same old same old. Yeah.
Really
Yeah, if
cool.
anything, if I had to put, if we were only allowed to put one career definition on our Facebook pages, I would use the word absolute, or one word, deconstructionist.
Deconstructionist is
Yeah,
awesome.
and
I was
yeah, and
going with an anthologist for you, but deconstructionist is good. And
no
I believe you actually
deconstruction.
used that to describe yourself somewhere because I remember reading somewhere about you and it said Antonio Tati, deconstructionist of something.
Maybe somewhere.
I
I
think you
don't think it's on
did.
my Facebook page, but I'm thinking of seriously changing it to
No, I
that.
didn't find your Facebook page. I'm not that big of a online sleuth, but I did find something and I do remember it saying deconstructionist. So you've used that before,
I've
which is
used it.
good. I think that fits you well.
Well, I think what's it called when you got the headstone and you've gone, you're under the ground. Tombstone, tombstone.
Graveyard, yeah, tombstone.
Yeah, but is it an epitaph? What's it called? The line
Epitaph, yeah.
epitaph. I think my epitaph was none of it was his.
You're gonna
None
put
of it
that on
was
there?
his.
You're gonna
None of
put
it
that
was
on there?
his.
None of it
None
was
of it
him.
was mine. None of it. I'll take that illustration. I'll turn it around. I'll make it mine. I'll take that song. I'll sample it. I'll make it a dance track. I'll take that interview I did 10 years ago and I'll force it into this anthology. Just recycle, recycle, recycle. I was actually going to call Cream magazine in the boardroom stage at the beginning RE. It was going to be called Re. And that was just before the whole eco revolution of the
Right.
mid 90s. And I
Hmm.
thought, oh, Re just sounds so right. And it would have been a perfect name for a magazine because right now everything is Re. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
everything seems to be Re. And Cream is just as suitable a name. But that's me to a T. And it's not because I'm lazy, Jacob, and don't want to come up with the original. It's because we agreed that nothing is kind of original under the sun anyway, except the
Right.
way you remantle it. Dismantle and
Absolutely.
remantle. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people do ignore that, and tend to see a lot of stuff regarding like, well, intellectual property is a bigger topic, but I see a lot of people saying like, oh, this is pretty much like what this person has done. You're doing the same thing that this person has done. Oh, this is kind of similar to what this person did. So it's just like, why are you even making your own thing? And it's just like, why does anybody do anything? Like, why do birds wake up in the morning and like hunt worms? Like, just because something has been done before does not mean that it will never be done again. You see this in nature all the time. Of course, humans are gonna do it. Like,
Mm,
you expect me not to take someone's joke and then improve upon it. Let's say like I hear
yeah.
a joke and then I tell it to someone else and then I improve upon it. That's the entire thing that jokes are for. And
Yeah. I mean, look,
as a result, through all of that filtration, the joke itself becomes funnier. So
yeah,
if a
absolutely.
thing can only improve the further that you go on, I see no reason for it to sort of fade away and for us to say, well, this is who owns it. This is the only person that can improve it, when it objectively becomes better.
I think what you hit on there as well, the aesthetic of the meme. If you look at a very good meme that a lot of people have gotten the joke of, by the time it's hit the last person to read it, it's this mangled looking, pixelated crap illustration,
Yeah.
comic joke, whatever. And the
Yeah.
font is fucking ugly, and you're just going, what the fuck? But the joke is still there. Do you understand?
Absolutely. Sometimes it's even funnier that way, yeah.
It's even funnier that way, exactly.
Antonino, it's been a wonderful pleasure and a good time interviewing you. I believe we touched upon a lot of topics. And unless there's another comment that you would want to say,
No,
or
let's
anything that
save
you
it.
would like to say or plug to the viewers, we'll be wrapping up.
No, no. I reckon hopefully we'll have another chat in the future if you want to go into detail about the
Of
dirty
course, we'll stay in
music
contact.
industry. We haven't started on the dirty music industry stories, whether it's me stalking a pop star in my early days or upsetting a rock star like Meatloaf and Nick Cave. I mean, we can go down that path another time, but I think we covered a lot of ground on this episode, so I'm really glad to
Absolutely.
have chatted. Yeah, chatted with you.
It's crazy that we've been chatting for almost an hour and a half, slightly over
Mm.
that by now. Time goes
No,
by
I'm
quick when
okay
you're
with
having
it. I
fun.
had my cigarette.
Well, there you go. That's all of your memories re refreshed. Yeah.
Okay, mate. It's a pleasure talking to you.
I imagine if you had more than one in a day, then you could pull through for an entire marathon. But no,
Yeah,
again, it
yeah.
was a pleasure having you on, and as always, we'll stay in touch. And thank you to everybody for watching. Antonino, it was a pleasure, and thank you to all of our viewers and listeners and patrons who have contributed to us so far. We're excited to bring you more information, and if you are at all curious or interested about Antonino's work, there will be several links in the description that you could follow.